Even your hospet images are class, Gautam. Really something unique.
Architecture and Humpy.
Yeah, Humpy. Oh, just out of the world.
Yeah, I'll talk about it. See, the basic thing is about 10 years back, right? We started exhibiting our images at Chitrakala Parishad, right?
Okay.
For cancer awareness.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. And we have been doing it for every couple of years, right? So the most important thing when you exhibit your images, especially for something like that, the main objective is for the image to sell, right?
Correct.
So the images can sell only if it has a wall value. That means if you can actually look at an image and say that it can go on your wall, right? That's where the image scores in an exhibition, right?
Correct.
So the most important thing is, especially since the objective is selling images for a cause, we also need to look at subjects which can be exhibited and which can be sold, right?
Correct.
Macro images, even though it's very close to my heart, unfortunately, it doesn't go on anybody's wall, right? It'll look good in a magazine, or it'll look good in a natural history documentary or whatever, right? But at the end of the day, the images that can go on a wall are architecture images, especially heritage images, right? That's what made me start looking at temple and architecture differently, right? How do you shoot differently, right? So that's what made me basically to start look at perspectives when I try to shoot those images.
Combination of perspective and lighting,
lighting is important.
Fantastic.
Yeah, lighting is important. Time is important. Lighting is important. How do you control the highlights is important. Shadows is important. Right, that's what I'm going to talk about today. But since it's wildlife focus group, I've not put any of those images here. It's more of landscape and macro things like that. Predominant, I've stuck to nature. But yes, thanks Satya. Thanks for noticing my architecture images, and thanks for liking it.
It's just too good. In fact, maybe we used to always plan. Remember January, February for pictorial.
Correct.
Late December and up to say 15th of January.
Correct.
So this time, I hope to be somewhere around there. Covering those places.
Yeah, I mean, if time permits, I'll also join. Let us see. But I would usually, I usually avoid blue skies, right?
Correct. It should be cloudy.
Yeah, for me, it's cloud is the most important thing. The highlights is most important in the sky, right? It should not be uniform. There should be highlights and shadows. It's different. So I usually go there in
monsoon. Is also a good season to go.
Yeah, I usually go there in monsoon. Winter, most of the time we spend in mountain. Yeah.
Yeah.
So shall we start?
Hello. Yeah. Better start. Hello, everyone. Hello. Hi, Goutham Ramesh sir and everyone. I'm Yogish. Hope everyone is doing good. A very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining today's webinar. Now I will give a brief introduction about star of today's session, Goutham Ramesh. Goutham Ramesh is an information technology executive by profession. currently living in Bangalore. He took keep interest in photography right from his student days, and has gone through many different and often um, phases of photography, subjects like macro, nature, travel, and people. He likes to call his work canvas of light and use light as an important aspect of his images. He also attends and conducts a photography workshop to share his knowledge. And in the last year, he won over 11 international awards, and more than hundreds of his images has been exhibited all over the world. Today is a great day, and he is there with us to share his knowledge, views, and his experience. Okay. And one more thing I would like to say that if you guys have any doubts or anything to ask, just stop them and ask your questions. And another thing, if webinar stops after 1 hour or anything happens during the middle, I would request all of you to join from the second link which we have sent. Thank you. Now without wasting any time, I would request Goutham Ramesh sir to take over the session. Over to you, Goutham Ramesh sir. Thank
Hey.
you. Thank you all.
Thanks a lot, Yogesh, and thanks for the group, basically for inviting me to give this presentation. I would always, it's a pleasure to share whatever I've shot. I've always done that, and whatever I know, I'll try to share it, and I'll also try to explain basically my thought process behind each of these images, right? I would rather call it as making images. There's a lot of effort involved, not only in shooting, the thought process behind it, the kind of lighting that I look for, right? So I'll try to share this knowledge with you guys.
Yeah,
right?
for us also, it's been a pleasure. Please share your views and
yeah. Thank you. Thanks a lot. I think all of you can see my screen, right?
It is visible.
Okay, great. So as Yogesh mentioned, right, I try to use as much as possible light as one of the most important aspects of my images, right? And I would like to call my work canvas of light because at the end of the day, light is what makes my images, according to me, right? And obviously, the other things do fall in place. But for me, the most important thing is the light, right? So, what is the importance of light, right? If you look at my images, even this mountainscape in Munnar, right? See, basically, it's not just light, right? There are a lot of things that you can see when you look at an image, right? The bright spot, the dark, the shadows, right? And obviously the direction of the light, right? It's very important. I believe lighting is a key factor in creating a good image. It also determines the darkness and the tone, the mood of the entire picture, right? And if you can control and manage light while making these images, right? Your images will start looking professional immediately, right? So that's the most important part. Subject and other things are also important, but the same subject can be shown in different ways, right? Whereas lighting is the most important aspect of this. I'll talk about my thought process behind each images when I show them, but I'm just trying to give the importance of light here, right? The next thing, highlights. Highlights is also important because they create more natural look in the image, right? I mean, it should not be just dark. There has to be a brighter side to the image and also to a darker side. So when I say darker, right, the shadows is also important. That's what I'm going to talk about next, right? The shadows are not just dark masks, the borders, right? Shadows actually uh, is as alive as the highlights in an image. The most important part that shadows provide, according to me, is the depth or the volume in an image, right? Since photographs are two-dimensional by physical nature, the shadow actually makes it three-dimensional. So if you use shadows and highlights effectively, it becomes three-dimensional, right? So as long as you control these two things, your images will certainly look very, very professional. And I try to do a lot of things basically to do with shadows and light, and most of them are optical rather than post-processing. I'll also talk about it. I use a lot of filters while making these images, right? I use a lot of graduated filters. I use a lot of technique. I'll try to share each one of those techniques with you guys, right? Now, predominantly, I have kept this presentation to landscape, macros, birds, and miscellaneous. I mean, not many miscellaneous pictures, but just to show the importance of light, right? So that's what I'll stick to, right? Now, this image is actually a very, very small incidental waterfall that occurs, right? It's not. It's just a part of a waterfall. You can see the mist that's coming through and hitting those rocks, and just because the mist is hitting those rocks, there are small streams that's coming down. So even though this is not part of a main waterfall, it looks interesting, right? So here again, the importance of highlights on the right. I've tried to show that here, and also the shadows here, right, to create some kind of a depth. Now, whenever we go to a waterfall, what do we do? We usually try to take an image like this. Correct? We usually try to take an image like this. Now, the image that I was showing you is actually this part. You can see my mouse, right? Can you see my mouse?
Yes.
Yeah. This is the part that
Yes, we can see the mouse.
this is the part that I've taken in these images actually, right? So you can just see how small it is, right? So I always believe it's not only the wide angle lens, your telephoto lens is also very, very important, especially when you are shooting landscapes. It makes you look at things which are very far, which you probably might not even perceive when you start shooting waterfalls, right? So I would always walk around, carry my 300 mm lens and start looking at different parts of the waterfall to see if there is anything interesting, right? And obviously, since it's a waterfall, it's a gorge, there is a lot of play of light and shadows when the water hits the ground, and there's a lot of mists also if the waterfall is very turbulent, like Barachuki Falls, where this is shot, right? So this is what the thought process is. Now coming to the exposure. The exposure is the most difficult part, especially when you are trying to shoot highlights, right? Usually you tend to, I use spot metering, and I usually take an exposure at the highlights level, right? And try to compensate it using manual exposure. If you look at my camera, most of the time it's on manual mode, especially while shooting landscapes. Or if it's birds, or it's going to be in the aperture priority mode, right? But most of the time it's in the manual mode. Because that gives me a lot of control on how I can set the exposure. So I try to give exposure to the highlights. And I also try to make sure that there is some details in the shadow. If it's not there, I'll try to bring it up in the post-processing as well, right? But I'll make sure my highlights are not blown most of the times. It's the same waterfall. This I just predominantly put this here to show how it actually looked. and this is what I create. I try to convert it into black and white, right? So the same waterfalls, this is how it looked, right? So again, if you look at the exposure, I've tried to make sure that the highlights are not blown, even though it's little blown here, but that does happen, right? But I've tried to control it as much as possible, right? And so this is important. I also believe that when you're getting into a landscape, it's always better to carry a telephoto lens. Now, this is something which is very common to people around Sagara, right? This is just part of a joke falls. The day I went there, again, you don't have to curse yourself if it's cloudy or, anything, because there are a lot of opportunities. You'll have to just put your telephoto lens and start looking at different parts, right? And this was just a small opening when it was completely misty. In fact, we could not even see the waterfalls. And I was just waiting for an opportunity for it to open. I call this as window through a cloud, right? To open, and it just opened, and I could get part of a waterfall, right? And made an interesting image, right? It's also important for you to visualize what you are shooting and what do you want, especially when you try to, take an image, right? So composition and other things, I'll not talk about it, but if you want me to talk about it, I'm happy to talk about it as well. I try to keep it very simple. If you look at my images, I usually divide my images into 3 different parts, horizontally and vertically as well. And the intersection points of those things, I call it as golden mean. And if you look at my images, most of my images, I'll try to keep the subject of interest somewhere around here or here or here or here, right? Not exactly in the center. That's what I try to do usually, right? And I also try, if possible, to connect those golden mean points through composition. So I'll try to keep it very, very simple most of the time, right? This is the Barachiki waterfalls that I was talking about. This again is, it's a composite image. The birds have been added by me later, but I'll tell you why, right? That's what I was talking to Satya before, right? I usually don't do this when I have to send my images for exhibitions or magazines or anything. But these kind of images do sell in exhibitions, right? So if some of you are interested in really, making images for exhibitions and selling it, for whatever the reason may be, the most important question that you need to ask yourself is, will you put this image on your wall, right? In your bedroom or in your living room, right? Or will you gift it to somebody, right? Who is not a photographer? Will he appreciate it, right? So that's the most important thing that goes in my mind when I try to shoot. But forget about the birds. But if you look at the other things, everything else is natural. Now, this is something which is very, very important, right? Usually, what do? We usually go to waterfalls early in the day or late in the evening. But if it is monsoon, the best time to shoot is actually around 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock. Because if the cloud opens, if the sun is exactly on the top, you'll get these rays, right? So that's all. That's something which I always plan. I always go through these waterfalls during monsoon to basically to get these kind of sun rays. These rays have not been added. It's natural. It's coming out. Again, if you look at it, I have tried to control by exposure, by exposing it to highlights. At the same time, try to control the shadows as well, right? And why black and white, right? Some of the images, especially if you look at, I do have color images, which I'll be showing you later. If I have to show drama in an image or depth in an image, I would always choose black and white, because just to avoid the distractions that the color would introduce in an image, right? That's what I usually do. That's my thought process when I shoot these kind of images. Again, this is not exactly evening as such. This was around 3:30, 4 o'clock. basically on the backwaters of Sholaya Dam near Valparai, right? Very interesting place, especially when you shoot water, especially in monsoon. If the sky opens up and if you get a race, you can see lot of drama on the water, also in the sky, right? Obviously, since it's monsoon, the water was not still. It was very windy. Otherwise, I would have really got a beautiful reflection of the sky on the water. But that's something which is very, very rare in monsoon because it's going to be windy most of the time, right? But it makes an interesting picture. And now, again, right, to get this particular view, in fact, I drove 12 kilometers along the backwaters to find an exact point, right? And after that, it's just a waiting game, right? Just waiting for the right moment for the sun to come out and take pictures, right? So this is another interesting image. This is actually a backwater of an Aliyar Dam, and you can see there's too much of water that year, and a lot of trees were submerged, and an early morning mist that was around that area, and the water glowing here made a very interesting image for me, and this was a good trip. But this, I think, I shot around 6:30 in the morning, just at the foothills of Valparai Mountains, right? And we left the hotel at Pollachi around 4:35 because I do shoot a lot of blue hour pictures also, which I've not included in this presentation. But if you can go to Instagram or Facebook and have a look at those blue hour pictures. So blue hour is an hour, 1 hour before sunrise or 1 hour after sunset. I do make a lot of images during that time as well, right? So the advantage is I get 1 hour before sunrise, then 1 hour after sunrise is a magic, especially if you are around a dam or a backwater with mist, especially in December, January, right? That's the whole process. Here again, if you look at it, I've tried to include light as the main subject. I've tried to show the highlights, even though it's a little blown out here. I could not control, right? But I've tried to include. Now, if I tried to overcompensate this, I would have lost the shadow details here. So it's always a trade-off between highlights and shadows. The best trade-off, the best thing that you can do is try to make sure that your highlights are not blown, at the same time your shadows are managed, right? It's all about exposure control. It's all about controlling your aperture and controlling your shutter speed, especially in landscapes, right? This is again another picture of Aliyar Dam, backwaters, early morning fishing. Again, I've tried to create a high key kind of effect here, just to show the mood and just to have a very subtle layers of mountains in the background, right? This is Munnar. In fact, this is what I was talking about. This again was shot with a 300 lens, right? I'll show you next image, which part of the mountain I was trying to shoot. This was after the sunrise. I always knew that during the sunrise, the orange light will hit one of these mountains. In fact, I expected the orange light to hit the clouds, right? Unfortunately for me, the clouds, in fact, raised very fast, bottom from the valley. So I could not get the entire cloud in orange, but I got only this part in orange. But I was lucky to get this mountain in orange, and it made a very interesting picture for me, right? Now, the mountain that I was showing was this, actually in the picture. This was few hours before that, early morning, Munnar. We were trying to shoot the Milky Way galaxy, and this is what we got. It's not a very sharp picture. I'm not happy about it, but I have sharper pictures also. The fire kind of thing that you see there is not actually a fire. It's actually a truck that's going through the Ghat road, and it's the mist that's been lit by the light of the truck, and that looks like a fire. It's not a fire at all. So this picture is very close to my heart because I never planned for it. In fact, I was cursing that guy when he was moving because when you shoot Milky Way, your shutter is open for 30 seconds. I was cursing, why the hell did this guy come? But the output was something else. It was amazing. I expected a line actually, but due to the mist, it looks like fire. So just an advantage. Shooting. This is Gubbagodu backwaters near Sagra, right? There's an interesting thing that I want to talk about this image. In fact, I talk about this many places. The most important thing for a landscape photographer or for any photographer is depth, right? So what is important, right? The important is to make sure that your foreground till infinity is within your depth. Now, is it possible? It is possible. It's a very simple mathematical calculation that you'll have to do to make sure you get the foreground as well as the background and sharp focus, right? Now, how do we do this? We do this by using something called as hyperfocal length calculation, right? Now, how do I do it? I do it using very simple technique. I use an app called as Photo Tool, right? Now, what does a Photo Tool app do? And I'm sharing the information that I usually do, right? All of you know what depth of field is. I'll also explain depth of field, right? All of you know what is the depth of field, right? Now, what does a hyperfocal length tell me, right? Now, this hyperfocal distance is basically from the closest to the lens till infinity, where you will have decent sharpness. Now, how do I calculate it? It's very simple. If you use this tool, right? I've just told what my camera is, what my lens is, and what aperture I'm shooting, right? When I say lens, the focal length of the lens is very important, and what aperture I'm shooting. The moment I enter this, it clearly gives me the minimum focusing distance is 0.891 meters till infinity. So as long as this particular stone is 0.89 meters from my lens, right? I'll get very sharp focus from this point to infinity, right? So that's what I do, right? I use a tool basically to calculate what is my hyperfocal distance and use it, right? So this is exactly what I do. So it's not a rocket science. It can be mathematically calculated also, right? And also, if you don't have a tool, you can have a chart like this, right? What's going to be the hyperfocal distance at different apertures? And obviously, as you see here, as you start closing your aperture, your hyperfocal distance comes very, 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 very close to your lens, right? So if I'm using a 16 mm lens and if I'm shooting at 2.8, anything starting from 10 feet onwards is going to be in sharp focus, right? So the closest subject you should keep it at 10 feet, right? So this is just a chart. So it always helps us to have a chart like this, right? And for me, it's become a habit. I know most of these numbers by heart now because I use a 15 mm lens or an 8 mm fisheye lens when I shoot landscapes, especially pictures like this, right? So it's become a habit. I know exactly how far my lens should be from the subject to make sure that I get everything from here to the background in focus, right? So that's what I do most of the time. So in case I'll pause here, if you have any questions, we can take it. Or if you have any questions, just make a note of it. At the end of the session, I'll be happy to answer. Right? Now, mountains, shooting landscape in mountains is very interesting, and it's a great experience, right? But you should also understand the mood of the mountains, right? Most of the times when you're at a very higher altitude, there's a huge possibility of a cloud or a mist uh, being below you, right? And that gives us a very, very great opportunity to make wonderful images if you are aware of it, right? So most of these things, what happens is early in the morning or late in the night, what happens is the clouds, because of the weather, it just goes down, right? And as the sun rises, it tries to come up, right? And that's where you get these interesting shots. I make sure that I am there around 4:35, especially in the mountains, and when I start shooting from the blue hour pack to try to get these kind of pictures, right? The same kind of pictures can morph into something like this after some time, right? And you can see the clouds have come up, and it's actually kissing the peaks, and it's just going away, right? So these are very, very important time when you can shoot these kind of pictures. Again, the importance of light is important. If you look at it, I've tried to show shadows, dark areas, little areas where there are details in shadows, very bright area, highlighted area, right? All these things do make an image, right? It should not be just plain flat, right? So shadows and details do make your images look three-dimensional, and that's always been my effort as well. Just to show, you can also use light and shadows to create patterns like this. This was shot in Thar Desert, right? So just to see how you can actually make use of highlights and shadows and set an exposure. Another important aspect of this image making is the filters. I think people who have attended my workshops would have seen me carrying a lot of graduated color filters apart from my neutral density filters, right? One of the filters that I like is sepia graduated filters, especially while shooting. It not only actually acts as a graduated neutral density filter, but also adds color, right? Now, is this natural? Maybe not. People might not like it, but I've sold many images of this in the exhibition. Okay, this has been one of my top images. I've sold multiple copies, maybe 8 or 9 copies of these images, right? Because it has a wall value. People would like to put it on their wall, right? So that's one thing. Now, again, as talking about mountains, this is Mount Trishul from Kausani, which is also called as Switzerland of India. We landed in Kausani around midday. It's completely cloudy, and you can see 9 kilometers of Nanda Devi range from Trishul to Nanda Devi in Kausani. I was so disappointed, but I always knew, especially in Himalayas, you should always be prepared. If you know where the mountain is, point your lens there and wait, because the air turbulence is such that in these higher altitudes, right, they will create window of opportunities. I call this as window of opportunities, right? I was very lucky that there was a window that was created on Mount Trishul, okay, and I was able to get this shot. And I was waiting, I was having my lunch, I had probably 3-4 cups of chai or tea, pointing my lens towards that direction and waiting. And this picture is actually not an instinctive picture. This picture actually took me almost 3-4 hours to make, right? And this was there only for a few seconds. So you can just imagine, right? So these kind of images also makes interesting. Again, control of light is very important. Since my camera is always on spot metering, I can always take a reading very quickly and adjust. The meter in your camera shows whether it's underexposed or overexposed. I usually tend to underexpose it a bit by a third stop, when I'm shooting manual, so that just to make sure that my highlights are not blown, right? And try to shoot it. This is what I was talking about. Early morning, the clouds are below you, makes a very interesting picture, right? And this is what orange I was talking about. This was a different day than the other images that you saw. But again, I'm even till now, I've not been able to make a picture where this entire thing is orange, right? But I've seen it. I've seen it happen. But that time, I did not have a camera. I was just walking around. But after that, I've gone there many times. I mean, I've not been able to make that picture. I've not got that perfect picture yet, right? But I'll keep visiting these places again and again. Monsoon is a very, very interesting time to make images, especially, right? This is BRLs, a very simple image actually. I will try to include two trees in the foreground just to show the expanse of monsoon clouds in BRLs. And you can see it's raining here, right? It is raining in different places, right? Just to show the beauty of monsoon, especially from BRLs, right? Again, if you look at here, there are brighter areas, there are darker areas, there are highlights. It's a way of controlling, right? Again, sun rays coming through a mountain pass in Devikulam, in Munnar. You can see how I've tried to include this tree here with two stones. I would have probably waited for a bit more for this to go down a bit, but unfortunately on that day there was a cloud which came and just cut this sun rays off. But I've gone there multiple times and I've got better pictures than this also, right? One is hanging on my wall in my office. But just to show like the importance of light, what I try to do usually, again, this image is not early morning, not late evening. This was around 2:30, 3 o'clock. See, this is what we do. Whenever I go to Munnar, I take my car and just do a recce. Just drive 20 kilometers on that side or this side to there, towards Teni or towards Top Station or towards Cochin to find out spots. Here I was sure that I'm going to get this race even if there is no clouds. Simply because there's a huge mountain here. So it's a pass. So when the sun goes behind that mountain, right, you get these rays. Now, how do you know when the sun goes behind that mountain? Very simple. You just need an app called as Skyview, right? If you have an app called as Skyview, you set a time, you'll know where the sun is, at what time, on that day, at which place, right? So we do use technology to cheat a bit, but it's all it all comes to being prepared, right? This is again a Milky Way. We tried to shoot in Munnar during sunrise. I was not sure whether I would get this shot, but I was lucky to get this shot. I've shot many pictures before this. I like this picture because the sun is rising and I was still able to get Milky Way. Now these are lights of resorts. Okay, these are lights of resorts. This is all these are lights of town below Top Station. So this is the same place, basically in color, a much closer view. Now, if you look at it, I've tried to use light as a very important part of the image, especially with hitting this tree against a dark background, right? I like this image a lot, right? Coming to wildlife, which most of you are now, I'll start showing you some wildlife images, including birds that I've shot. BRLs. Now we were driving to BRLs in my car, and suddenly we saw this wild elephant just come into the road. I was so lucky. I always wanted to take a picture like this on the road, because a lot of road is one place where you have, trees cleared, right? And you have trees on the left and you have trees on the right. So there's a huge opportunity for you to get a spotlight kind of an effect. And I always wanted to shoot something or the other in the spotlight, maybe a tiger or a leopard or whatever it is. But I was lucky to get this beautiful, beautiful elephant, right, in BRLs, a wild elephant crossing the road. And do you know what this guy did? This guy stopped, and there were a lot of, he was part of a herd, and there were a lot of elephants following him. And he did not move from the road, and he kept looking at us till the herd crossed the road. Then he allowed us to cross. A very gentle giant. He did not threaten. He did not even do a mock charge, anything. He just stood there and he kept watching us, right? So this gave me a great opportunity to make a picture that I would like with a spotlight. This is Maidnalli. Again, you don't have to go really very, 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 very close to get a wildlife image, right? You can actually include landscapes in your wildlife image and still make a good image, right? But obviously other things should fall in place, like sun, sky, and other things, right? This is Rangantittu. In Rangantittu, there's the great opportunity for you to shoot these kind of pictures, especially during January, February, March, when these pelicans do come to Rangantittu, and they do dive into water to drink and pick up the sticks for nesting, right? And it gives you a great opportunity to make these kind of pictures. All you need is a stand, a panoramic head, so that you can pan actually, because they move, they dive into water when they fly. In fact, they swoop down, right? And all you need is basically a good stand to pan. And this shot was shot there, right? So this one as well, right? So these shots are not difficult to make actually, if you are at the right place and if you know what to do. And again, the most important thing, they are diving and moving all around the place, right? So what I did was, this was not shot from the boat. I just walked around. You have a beautiful pathway in Rangantittu where you can walk around. I did walk around and I found a place where the background was dark. That's very important to me, right? Because I would like to have the background dark so that, the light is only on the river. And when the light is only on the river, you get these kind of shots. So it's not instinctive. There are a lot of thought process that goes behind making these images. Selection of a place where to shoot. In landscape, the most important thing for you to, or even birds or wildlife, if you want to have some kind of a pictorial aspect, the most important thing for you is to walk around and figure out which is the best place to shoot, right? Look for backgrounds, because I believe background makes a picture, right? It's not only foreground, right? It's background also makes a picture. Most of the time, it's the background that makes a picture in wildlife. So it's very, very important for you to understand that, right? A spoonbill just trying to land. Just again, trying to show you how I've used highlights. Obviously, Rangantittu, it gives you a great opportunity, especially early in the morning, where the other side of the bank is completely dark because it's in shadows, right? And river, and the light is only on the river, right? And you can make these kind of images, right? A very simple image this is. Again, I'm not trying to go too close to the bird. I was really far off from the bird. Again, I've used light here. If you look at it, you can see catch light in the bird's eye. Catch light is very, very important, because if there is no catch light, somebody told me long time back when I started making bird pictures, right? Goutham, if there is no catch light in the bird's eye, the bird looks dead. It looks like a stuffed bird, right? That rings in my ears even today, right? So I tried to create a catch light in the bird while shooting. Sometimes it's natural. Sometimes all you need to do is just switch on the flash on flash. Flash can create a catch light, right? Need not be too bright. Just a small flash can trigger a catch light, right? Obviously, you should not disturb the bird. The bird is not disturbed. He was happily fishing, right? And I was able to get this image. So I try to include as much as space as possible while shooting birds.
Goutham,
Hello?
hello.
Yeah.
If any have questions, unmute your mic and you can ask any questions.
Yeah, sure.
Anybody can ask questions.
Sure. I've still a lot of slides to show, so I'll try to rush through. Right, at the same time, show the importance of this. Again, a picture of a pelican in Ranganthittu, right? A pelican in Ranganthittu. A grey heron, right? Just sitting there, early morning, right? This was not Ranganthittu. This is one of the lakes near Kanakpura. A beautiful atmosphere. I could get a spotlight, and I knew the bird was sitting there fishing, and I was able to make a good picture out of it. Again, if you look at the composition, I've tried to place it somewhere here, not exactly in the center. Try to add balance. The direction of the light is this way, right? I also try to control the highlights and shadows. A typical picture which you can make in Ranganthittu. Basically, painted storks do drink water, and when they lift their head from the water, you get all this water drops and spark. This picture is very, very old. It's from 2005 with my first digital camera, Nikon D50. That's when me and Satya used to meet quite often and shoot together, right? With this camera. Some of the bird images that's been shot. This is from a hide. Most of you know which hide it is, but anyway, again, the catch light is very, very important. So even when I sit in a hide, make sure that there is catch light in the bird's eye, and also try to shoot birds doing something. Right? It's not just a plain bird sitting there. Right? Try to see if you can get pictures of the birds communicating or birds eating something like this, right? Or birds eating something like this, right? So it's all wait. It's a waiting game, right? So this is what I also do. We do wait a lot when we are shooting birds, right? And I'm sure most of you are into bird photography, which is quite common these days in Bangalore. Hide photography gives you an opportunity to shoot birds and watch birds at a very close distance without disturbing them. The hide photography as we do it today is totally different from what we used to do long way back. Satya knows about it. We used to carry gunny bags and stick. In fact, go with the binoculars. It was a month affair for us to get one bird shot. Right? We used to go with binoculars and see if there is an activity of a bird, see if there is a nesting opportunity, see if whether we can set up a hide without disturbing the birds and things like that. Right? Those days are gone. Now you have specific hides in Sattal, Shivamogga, Bangalore, where you can just pay some amount, go and sit and shoot. Right? So it's taken off all the hard work, but I still enjoy those kind of bird photography where you study the behavior of the bird, understand the bird, understand its nesting season. Now, most of them don't even know what is the breeding season of the bird, right? We do know as old timers what is the breeding season of the bird, right? And we used to carry our binoculars and go and understand and study the bird. Oriental white-eye, red-whiskered bulbul, tree pie, Montagu's Harrier. This was shot in Maidnalli. what I've seen is I've seen these harriers come down to the ground, especially early in the morning, probably for rodents or probably for heat. Or, I don't know what it is, but it's quite a common sight to find them on the road, right? It's a very beautiful bird. In fact, it migrates from Eurasia, I think, all the way till India. It's a beautiful bird, and this is the only picture of the bird I have. Jacana. This is also called as God bird or Jesus bird because it gives you a sense of walking on water. Again, it's a very beautiful bird. In fact, we did multiple visits. We did observe Jacana activity happening all over the place. If you are very close to Bangalore, on the Kanakpura road, you can see a lot of lakes where these lilies grow, lotus grow. And if there are lilies and if there are lotus, there is a Jacana, right? The only thing is you'll have to just observe, right? A takeoff from the water. So again, if you look at my bird images, make sure that lighting is all right, the exposure is all right, and also if there is an action, if there's a possibility of an action, I'll try to include action as well. And with birds, you should always be prepared. You cannot take your eye off because they can fly anytime. And that moment is an opportunity for you to shoot birds, right, in flight. Rangantitu, the pelican actually carrying a twig for its nest gives a good opportunity to make some good pictures. A simple Eurasian collared dove on the way to BRLs, shot from a car. Jungle bush quail. Coming to macro. Now, this is a subject which is quite hot these days, right? A lot of people have been shooting macro these days. It's one of the most hottest topic these days. A lot of people are taking up macro photography. That was not the case when I started 20 years back, right? Probably I was one of the few guys who started it first. But I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot with new techniques. I never used to shoot macro with lights, artificial lights. But these new gen photographers have introduced me to an amazing world of macro photography using lights, right? So I don't necessarily use one source of light to shoot macro pictures. I sometimes use multiple sources of lights. I do carry 2 flashes to shoot these kind of pictures. It's not that I don't make macro pictures with natural light. I do make macro pictures with natural light. In fact, most of my macro images are with natural light. But these spiders, they're very tiny, and I do use flash, right? And thanks to this new gen of photographers like Uday, Hayat, they have introduced me to amazing, techniques which I can use basically to make some good images of these spiders, right? My technique can be as simple as this. I don't know whose camera is this. This is not my setup, but my setup looks somewhat similar to this, right? Basically use a diffuser to basically cut down and even out the light, right? And I'll also talk about the shadows in while using a diffuser and why it's important, right? And a simple do-it-yourself diffuser would help on a macro lens. There are advanced diffusers available today for a price. You can buy something like this for a very simple price as 1,500, and it can go on. It can go on till 6,000, 7,000 rupees. Now, when you are shooting macro, the most important thing is the aperture, right? The depth of field. Now, all of you know, or some of you know, what's the effect of the depth of field. I am of the opinion, even shallow depth of field images look good, right? I have tried to shoot pictures with shallow depth of field, which I'll try to show you later in the presentation. But you should understand what is important, right? How aperture affects your images, right? The more you close, you have a higher depth of field. The more you open the aperture, you have a very shallow depth of field. So I will not say you have to do this or do that. It depends on the situation, what you want to shoot. If you want a higher depth of field, then close your aperture. If you want a very shallow depth of field, then open your aperture, right? And as you know, how the focal length also affects aperture, magnification affects aperture. So there is no general rule, right? People would usually say, hey, keep f8 and you'll get most of your pictures within your depth of field. That's not true. It also depends on the magnification, and it also depends on the focal length of the images, right? People who have shot with 50 mm have got greater depth of field because they crop their images, right? That's one way of doing it. Take a very good resolution camera like 40 megapixels extra, which you get these days. Shoot with a lower focal length, 50 mm or even 90 mm, and crop it. You will certainly get a depth of field, right? Nothing is wrong in doing it, and nothing is wrong in post-processing. Nothing is wrong in cropping. Ansel Adam used to do it in the lab, and you do it on Photoshop. There's nothing wrong in it, right? I believe art should not be restrictive, right? It's a way of expressing yourself and basically conveying whatever you have to feel, right? That's one of the reasons which has kept me away from salons. Basically, I feel it's too restrictive, but I do participate. I've been participating only from last 2 years, not before that. But I do pick and choose where to participate, right? But I always believe, don't shoot for salons, shoot for yourself, shoot for creating an image or making an image which has an impact, right? And salons will happen naturally, right? If your picture falls into the rules of the salon, send it. As simple as that. Hylas spider, female basically, right? It's also called as heavy-bodied jumper, semi-copper jumper. Again, this is in my garden. This is a Corona lockdown image, right? I do have a lot of dahlia plants and just to attract butterflies and spiders, right, in my garden. And there are a lot of spiders in my garden, so it gives me an opportunity to shoot a lot of them. Sometimes like this. Again, here I have used 2 sources of light, one below the flower and one with a diffuser on the camera. So that's the reason why you can see the flower is lit actually. With pollen, again on the dahlia plant, right? This is with flash. Now the next image that I'm going to show you is not without flash. It's a natural light, right? So it's not necessary for you to always go close to a spider and shoot its eyes, right? You can make images like this. These images are done well in exhibitions, right? Exhibitions, I'm talking about salons, right? Especially international salons, where they like to see play of light in your image, right? A crab spider waiting for its prey on a dahlia leaf with a natural light. No flash used, nothing. It's just natural backlight. So it's not necessary for you to have a Renox or a high magnification lens. Go close. You can still make macro images with your normal lenses. These kind of images can be made with a 300 mm lens, right? With your tele lens, right, or a 200 mm lens, right? With natural light, right? So it's not absolutely necessary for you to have a high-end gear, high-end macro lens, or high-end diffusers to make these images, right? So this is pure natural light. This is not natural light. This is Nandan was there with me. I think he also has a similar shot of this green huntsman spider. Again, you look. The idea is to use light. Basically, use light as one of the most important part of my image making. Right. So it's very simple. Just use a flash behind the leaf to get this image, right? So I wanted to show the structure, the veins of the leaf, and how the spider is sitting on the leaf, and how it's hiding behind the leaf, and also try to get some kind of a translucent effect on the spider. This is an image of rainbow spider, as they call it, Stenarius. And this spider has blue eyes. I mean, I thought it was my diffuser before, but I've seen many images with blue eyes on this spider. So very colorful, very, very small ground running spider. And this again, I've used a diffuser here. You can see the diffuser. And in fact, if you zoom it, you can also see my lens there, right? In the image. This is Chrysilla female. Again, you can see I've used a mobile actually here, mobile light basically to lit the leaf from below while I was taking this shot. Natural light image. This is not use flash or anything. This is a rainwater land lily which grows predominantly in Lalbagh, and a crab spider. Usually you find crab spiders on these lilies. I mean, if you search 10 or 12 flowers, you're sure to find one crab spider sitting there, especially in Lalbagh, because they hide behind these leaves to catch butterflies or bees that get attracted to this lily. And this is a natural light image shot with backlight obviously. And if you look here, I have actually used a very shallow depth of field to create those kind of lines in the background, right? Again, multiple flashes used below a leaf, which is a red leaf, to get this kind of image. Not gone too close. Try to compose the spider and try to get this. I did not want to post this, but just to tell people, I have also shot Chrysilla, right? A beautiful spider which shows up in Bangalore just when the summer rain starts. That's when I've seen them. I don't see them otherwise. They are there. A lot of them are there, but they don't show themselves up because they run behind a leaf. They hide themselves a lot, but a very, very colorful spider. Again, Carahotus, basically to show how lighting can create a different kind of image, right? So I've used multiple flash sources. A different kind of image to show a spider looking at a brighter part of the flash, right? And I always wanted to make an image like this. I was lucky I was able to get a shot. And this image is not difficult to make actually. The spiders do move around a lot, right? So if you are lucky, you can get these kind of shots as well. It's not just headshot that I would like. Breta's very, very challenging image this was, because the most challenging part of this image was to make sure that I could get those eggs properly, right? Lot of exposure compensation went into it to make sure that I could get those eggs. So it's in fact made many shots, and I could get few shots without really blowing out those eggs. A Bretta spider, a very beautiful spider, a dedicated mommy spider. If you see a Bretta spider with eggs, please don't disturb it. But it'll allow you to make pictures. It's a very dedicated mommy. It stays with its eggs till it hatches for a couple of weeks. And even with young ones, it tries to be with it for a week or so before it just vanishes. Right? A very, very beautiful mommy. I love this spider. Pintella spider. Again, if you look at the images that I have shot, you can look at a lot of light on leaves. That's intentional. I use multiple flashes to get these kind of images. A crab spider on an area. Again, this is with respect to, this is also a natural light image, no flash used. You can also see a trip line. This is a trip line which it uses to actually sense a prey. So if a bee or something comes here and lands here, if this trips, spider knows where to jump and attack. Right? So I want to show a trip line here. Spiders do help us a lot. They do eat mosquitoes. So this is a pintella that's eating a mosquito. Again, used a flash basically to create that kind of a red leaf effect when I'm shooting, when I was shooting this particular crab spider. You'll see a lot of images like this with different flash used. I'm not saying this is what you should be doing. It's just one way of showing it, right? I mean, some people might like it, some people might not like it, but I would like it. I would like these kind of images. So, irrespective of salons or competitions or whatever it is, I shoot for myself first, and if it fits the bill, then it goes into the salon. A predator and a prey, right? Basically, a Telemonia spider is there, and this mosquito is just sitting there, oblivious to the fact that it can be hunted. Some natural light images. These are the kind of images that's very, very close to my heart. In fact, most of my images are these kind of images. People might not have seen them, but I have shot a lot of butterflies with natural light. Why I wanted to show this was shot with completely open aperture, 3.5 on my 180 mm, right? So it goes against the ethos of macro photography, where people say you'll have to close your aperture. Not necessary. You don't have to close your aperture. You can completely open your aperture, still get a decent shot. Only one thing that you should be aware of is your camera lens has to be parallel to the subject of interest. As long as your camera lens is parallel to the subject of your interest, that plane of depth of field is parallel to your lens, and you can get a good picture. Natural light image of common immigrant mating, no flash used. So it's not necessary to use a flash, but these days people do use flash, right? But it's not necessary to use a flash. You can get very, very good images, decent images, great images with natural light. Very difficult to shoot, right? The bokeh. Basically, sometimes I try to use bokeh also as part of my subject. This is a black spotted grass jewel, which I shot in Valley School sometime back, and try to use, basically a gap in a tree as a bokeh to get this image. Same grass jewel without bokeh, natural light, no flash used, right? With backlight. Again, natural light. You can see a praying mantis. Very shallow depth of field to create that kind of an effect, right? I mean, in fact, I've completely opened the aperture to get this shot. Again, basically a long on beetle with natural light on a land lily. You know, again, a butterfly, a simple image, just to show, like, what shallow depth of field can do to your pictures. Right. So thanks for listening me out. Right. I don't know whether the meeting is still on. Hello.
Hello, we can hear.
Okay.
Hello.
It was a monologue. I was not sure whether the meeting is still on. So, okay. So, thanks for bearing with me. So these are the images that I wanted to share. I have a lot of images. Probably we'll meet some other time, or you can go through, my handles, Facebook, Instagram. I have a website which I don't maintain that often, but I put some images there as well, some articles there as well. You can follow me, and you can obviously contact me through an email as well. Right? I put exclamation, question mark, and exclamation as basically my mantra. Always a surprise followed by questioning, and once you know the answer, there's a surprise again. Right? So that's the reason why I always put that. Right? So in case if you have any questions or anything, I can answer in Kannada, English, whatever language, right? You can just let me know. Thanks for listening to me, and
Participants,
I hope
anyone have any doubts or any yeah, you can ask.
Can you send these pictures in that WhatsApp group is then?
yeah.
And
You
it
want me
was
to?
not a question. Yeah, you send it's not question.
Okay. I have created a small video of this presentation. Ishanya, I'll send it to Ishanya. Probably you can upload it wherever they deem fit. But I think the length is long. But if you want to see most of these images, most of these images are there on my Instagram handle. But I don't mind if this presentation is shared with the group. Wildlife Focus group can do it. Whatever is required for that, I'm ready to share.
Also,
Yeah,
you can
because
watch
I don't
this webinar
have
in our
Instagram,
YouTube channel.
Yeah, this is going to be on the YouTube channel as well.
We will share link in WhatsApp group.
Yeah.
Hello. Thank you, sir, for giving your valuable insights on the topic. So that we will go ahead and take time for questions. Dear participants, if you have any questions, please ask.
Let me switch on my video, because it's always good to put face behind the voice.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes.
So
Please, sir.
Sir, hello.
yeah.
Good evening, sir. Sir, have you switched on to spot metering in all of these situations? I mean, especially macro.
Yes, it's spot metering has been my friend throughout. Macro images, natural light, I use spot metering with flash. And it doesn't matter. So flash, my mantra is very simple. I close the aperture as much as possible and use diffuser, right? Obviously, I do measure light, but it doesn't really matter. Whereas in natural light, yes, I do use spot metering a lot to make sure that I have the right kind of exposure on the subject of interest wherever I'm shooting, right? And I do compensate my images. Most of the times I do shoot in manual mode, right? Because the dynamic range that I try to achieve in my images is from highlights to shadows, right? I'm not got that kind of good automatic metering help from my earlier cameras, but should say my Nikon D750 is doing a great job with even when I use matrix metering, it's giving me some accurate exposures. I'm really surprised, but predominantly my habit is to switch to manual mode and use spot metering and use the scale below to see where I am when I'm taking a picture.
Thank you. Any questions? Please go ahead, sir.
Okay, I think Ashok is asking what lens do you use for landscape? I would say what lens I would not use for landscape. I use all lenses for landscape, right? My favorite lens for landscape is my 300 f4 Nikon lens. It's a telephoto lens. People use it for bird photography and all. I use it for landscape because it allows me to shoot that part of the landscape which is not visible to wide angle lens, right? Apart from that, I use my wide angle lens. I have, if it's a crop body, I use my Tokina 1116. On a full frame, I use my Lava 15 lens, which is actually a macro lens. I use it for landscapes and wide angle shots, especially hyperfocal lens shots. I have a Samyang 8 which I use on my Sony mirrorless to get perspective shots. So I use a lot of lenses. 24, 120 Nikon lens I have. So I use all lenses for my landscape. But if I have to really choose a lens that I like for landscape, I would say my 300 prime. People will not believe if I say I shoot landscape with 300 prime, but I've shot some of those images that you shot with 300
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Participants, you can unmute yourself and ask questions. Feel free to ask questions. Thank you.
Okay. I think Cheyenne has a question on copyright. It's a very tough question because the copyright laws in India is not that great. See, basic thing is when you upload it on a web, predominantly you should accept the fact that the image can be stolen, right? That's something which you can't prevent. So it's good to make sure that you have a record of your upload. So in that way, Instagram and Facebook, provides you a record of your upload. So you will know that you are the author of the picture. And obviously, don't try to post high resolution images. But at the same time, right, if you don't post your high resolution images, at least 1920 pixels on the longer side, right? The pictures don't look good on Instagram or Facebook. So when you are shooting online, it's a little difficult, but at the same time, take all precautions to make sure that you watermark your images, put your watermark at the right place. Don't post high resolution images which can be downloaded and printed. But having said all this, there are people who steal images. It's very bad. You can't do anything about it. But if you catch them, you can really take them to task. Are you using ND filters in landscape? Lukesh has questions. I do use. I do use ND filters a lot during landscape, especially if the light gets too bright, right? And one place where I use them most is when I'm shooting a waterfall, right? That's where I would like to keep my shutter speed very low, basically to get that milky effect, or even when there is a mist. When the mist moves and if your shutter speed is very low, right, you get a sense of a milky effect in the entire landscape. So I do use ND filters, especially in landscape. Satya, some inputs on using multiple flash. Satya, I mean, you should know, basically when you are using multiple flash, it depends on what exactly you want to shoot. So if it's a macro subject, one flash is mounted on your camera with a diffuser, right? The other flash can be placed depending on where you want the lighting to be. Why I use multiple flash most of the times is to make sure that the picture does not look flat, because with one flash there's a huge tendency of picture looking flat, whereas with multiple flashes you can create some kind of a glow below or some kind of a shadow coming from side, right? So I use multiple flashes. Now how do you sync those two flashes together, right? When this fires, the other should also fire. There are multiple ways of doing it. The simplest way of doing it is to use flash in a slave mode. Now, even if you don't have a flash with a slave mode, you get a hot shoe with a slave. Just Amazon, just search for flash hot shoe with slave mode. You can use one of that. So when you connect that, when your main flash triggers, the other flash also triggers. The most important thing is not to use your flash in a TTL mode, because if you are using two flashes and if you are using your flash in a TTL mode, a TTL flash actually fires multiple times to gauge the distance, to gauge the output, and this multiple times can trigger your second flash, right? So the second flash can be triggered when the shutter is not open, because TTL flash has a tendency to fire multiple times even before the shutter opens, right? So when you are using multiple flash, use a slave. Try not to use TTL. TTL means automatic mode in your flash.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, is there any chance that our subjects get distracted or, it's become harmful while using harsh flash and?
Yes. Not much of research has been done on subject getting disturbed. It depends on what subject you're talking about, right? Any kind of bright light is not natural to most of the subjects, whether it's birds or spiders or whatever it is. So that's the reason why we use a diffuser. We try to cut it down as much as possible. It's not only to cut down the light, it's also to make sure that your flash does not hit the subject directly. It's an ethical question, but there are a lot of things in photography which are questionable, right? But what I suggest is, as long as you don't handle the subject, you don't disturb it, right? You are safe. Now, is flash harmful? There's no study that's been done to say flash is harmful. I've seen spiders not reacting to flash at all sometimes, especially if it's very well diffused, right? So it's an open question, right? So if you feel that you're harming it, don't do it. And that's what I would say, right? I would make sure that I don't harm my subjects. There have been instances where I have gone 3-4 kilometers to leave the spider in a safe place, right? I found a chrysilla near my garden. I took it to JP Nagar forest and dropped it, right? So it's always a trade-off, right? If your conscience says that you're hurting it, stop doing it. It's as simple as that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Participants, any doubts, please ask.
You can actually text also. Satya, I hope I answered your question on multiple flash. Shayan, I hope I answered your question on copyrights. Ashok, I hope I answered your question on what lens to use. You are interested in wide angle macro. Can you suggest a lens which support the wide angle macro? Is a beast, Ashoka. I don't know what kind of pictures you want to shoot with wide angle macro, but it's something which is very difficult to use. If you want a very ultra wide angle macro, I would suggest Lava 15mm lens, which is a very good macro lens, but it's completely manual, right? That's what I would suggest as well, right? There are a lot of lenses, but Lava lens is a very good lens for macro.
Any questions? Please go ahead.
Yeah, but Satya, I said post in 920 px. I mean, I see these days I keep it the DPI at 240. Basically, because the resolutions of these phones have increased, and anything less than that, basically you lose details when somebody looks at those images on Instagram or thing. The idea of posting the images on the Instagram is to first claim the ownership of my image. So there is a record saying that, okay, Goutham has shot this, right? I tell all of you basically to do it. Shoot a picture, don't hide it, post it, put your watermark so that it becomes your trademark, right? And not only that, since we tag Nikon India, we tag Sony, right? It's 1920, Satya. Post-processing tips for nightscapes. Yeah, I mean, most of the nightscapes images, there is very less. There is very less room for post-processing because your images exposure has to be, perfect, right? Only thing is, if it's a star trail, obviously you'll be merging multiple images. There is a technique for that. You can go to my website to see how to do that. And even Milky Way, you can just go to my website to see how to do that. I've written articles there on that. So nightscapes, it's predominantly merging, or especially with Milky Way, it's color correction, setting the right temperature is what is important. That's what I do. Insights on printing images, Nandan, very, very important. If you look at my images, right, when I shoot images, I don't shoot images for Instagram or Facebook. I do print a lot of my images, predominantly for exhibitions, and obviously to give it as gifts and things like that. So when I shoot my images, I'm aware of the fact that my images are going to get printed. So I'll try to compose it within the camera itself. Very less cropping is done on my images. If it's done only at the border. So it's very important. So first thing, if you are printing your images, your images should be of the highest resolution possible from your camera. So forget about cropping. Even if it's cropping, it has to be very limited. Second, tips while printing images, right? The second tip while printing images is basically your color is very important. Color is very important. So I do process my images on Mac with a calibrated monitor, Dell monitor, right? Ultra sharp. In fact, I replaced my Apple monitor with this because it gave me 9-bit depth color. So color is important. So most of the pictures that I see on monitor, my monitor, is how it looks on the print. Right? If that is not the case, it's very important for you to take 2 or 3 sample images to your printer, get it printed, see what adjustment needs to be done, and then get it printed. Right? And yeah, Adobe RGB. sRGB color space is good for web, but for while printing, most of the printers, Epson printers especially, recognize Adobe RGB. So I keep my images at Adobe RGB for printing. For web, I convert it into sRGB. That's what I do. After selling my images, do I retain the original or delete it? Very important question. Most of my images are sold for charity, right? It's not an absolute sale, so I retain the copyright. I retain the original, right? Because what I sell is not an image. What I sell is a print, framed print, right? So it depends. So most of the times my images are sold as a print. It's like selling a painting. I do retain my copyright of my images. If I have to really give up my images, not use it again, then the price is going to be certainly higher, right? There's another thing that I want to tell you guys, right? If you are thinking of really being an artist, or start looking at your image as an artist, imagine who your competitor is. Your competitors are painters. Their paintings are done on canvas with a minimum length of 3 feet by 2 feet. You need to compete with them. In order to compete with them, you should be able to print your images without any distortions at that size at least. That's the reason why I say it's very important not to crop. It's very important to compose in the camera itself. And it's very, very important for you to, make sure the highest resolution is available for print. Right? And since I do sell my images in exhibitions, I make sure I do that. Any apps resolution for print, Chetana? As much as possible.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, while doing post processing in laptop or PC, and after that converting to mobile to in order to upload to websites like Instagram and Facebook, don't you feel that there is a bit of change in color saturation and contrast? How do we manage to keep it the same? I'm asking whether we need to do again post processing in mobile, or how do you manage to to keep control of that?
Correct. See, the question is twofold, right? I usually, when I post to Instagram and WhatsApp, first thing I do is I convert it into sRGB, color space. I don't post it in Adobe RGB because browsers or even these apps cannot handle Adobe RGB color space properly. Okay, colors are going to get skewed. That's the one thing that you need to do. Second thing is, do I process images specifically for WhatsApp or Instagram? No, I don't. Right? I process it for printing. I just export it into JPEG and post. Right? Now, does it look dark, bright, or this thing on phones? I don't really care because it's subjective. Right? If somebody is looking at my image on a high-end Samsung phone or a high-end iPhone, it will look good to him. But somebody using a phone with automatic brightness set, looking at my images standing outside in the sun and saying, "Hey, Goutham, your image looks little darker." I would tell them, why don't you go to your place, sit in a very good shadow area, increase the brightness of your phone to 50%, look at my image and then give me a feedback. Otherwise, don't give me a feedback. Right? Because phones do react to light these days. They adjust their brightness automatically. So looking at an image on a phone or a tab and getting too worried about it is not something we should be doing. As long as it looks great on your PC, as long as it looks great when you print it, don't worry about how it looks on Instagram and WhatsApp. It's going to look good. So concentrate on processing your images for print on your calibrated monitor, and forget about other things. It will certainly look good. There is a bit of loss when you post on WhatsApp or Instagram or even on Facebook because it compresses. One thing that I've noticed is when you post on Facebook, if you post it in an album, the resolution is maintained, but if you post it on your wall directly, it compresses. So that's an important tip. So always create an album and post it inside an album to get the best resolution. The color accuracy on low-end laptops and the color accuracy on phones. So the color saturation, yes, that's correct. Some of these phones have better color accuracy. The best thing to do is, as you invest on your camera, as you invest on your lens, get a good monitor. Don't depend on your laptops. Get a good monitor. A good ultra sharp monitor would cost somewhere around 20,000 onwards. Get a good monitor, pre-calibrated monitor. And if you don't have a pre-calibrated monitor, get it calibrated. You get a device called a Spider. Right? You can go and check on the web. That device is available for 4,000, 5,000 rupees. I mean, it can measure the light and give you a color space, which is neutral. Any other questions?
Participants, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Okay. Looks like there are no questions. Do we have time, Ishanya? Yogesh?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay.
Any questions? Please ask. Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, any tips or suggestions for beginners or young wildlife photographers?
Okay. What kind of suggestions? Okay. Okay. First thing is, wildlife photography is something which is very exciting, right? At the same time, it's very challenging. The most important thing that you should possess in wildlife photography, apart from all other things, is patience, right? Because nature has its own way of doing things. It will not do things according to us, right? Patience, persistence is the most important thing in wildlife photography. And the other thing is, wildlife does not necessarily mean, safari or anything. If you can do it, do it. You don't have to get disappointed about it. Even when you go to a safari, right, there are a lot of other things that you can start shooting. You can start looking at birds. You can start looking at your trees, flowers. There are so many things that you can do, right? So it's an exciting and an interesting part of photography. In fact, KD Satya, who is there on this thing, is a very, very, very good wildlife photographer, right? So you can go to his Instagram and look, right? Right. So the most important thing that you need is patience. Um, lens is important, but it's not necessary for you to have a lens to go close up, right? You can actually do wildlife photography with a lot of space around the subject, as long as you know there are subjects, there is mood in the picture. That's important. So um, patience is the most important thing. Persistence is the most important thing in wildlife photography, and not getting disappointed and giving up is another important thing in wildlife photography. The most important thing is understanding your subject. Is very important in wildlife photography. You should know the behavior of the animal. You should know the behavior of your subject even before trying to shoot it. Because it's not just carrying or hiring lenses and going and shooting, right? A lot of things that you need to understand with respect to the animal in wildlife photography. Should always remember that you are trying to capture the animal in its natural habitat and not disturb it, right? So it's very important to understand the behavior of the animal as well. Now, did that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Yeah, sir. Thank you, sir.
And Satya is asking Gautam, just to reconfirm your advice to create an album and post into it rather. Yes, Satya, if you create an album in Facebook and post into that, your image will be posted in high resolution. There will be no compression. I have issues of banding in some. Is it because of DPI issue? Probably yes. We'll have to look at it. So, any more questions, guys?
Hello, sir. Ashok is asking to show some humpy landscapes. If possible, please, sir.
Do we have time? Do we have time for that?
Yeah, sir. Yeah.
We can do another time for only
Another time, but
10 minutes.
yeah,
You can also show.
and show him some of the humpy landscapes. But I'm not organized it. It's organized, but it's. I do have I've cataloged my collections very well, but all these are high resolution images, so it will take time to load even if I click. Right. So some of these are my humpy images. We can do since this is wildlife in focus group, I did not include any of these images. So my screen is not visible.
Yes,
It's not visible.
it's not visible. Now it's.
Is it visible now?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So I'm just trying to pull out something from my heritage collection, but humpy images, lots of them. I can show some of them. This is just a raw image. It's not even processed. NEF. Right? So you can see a lot of images like this, standard. Only thing is, all these are high resolution images. It will take some time to load, even if I,
Yes, sir. Yeah. No issues, sir.
So we'll have to do it some other time.
Sure, sir. Sure. Thanks a lot, sir. It was a really informative session and wonderful, sir. Thanks a lot for spending your time with us. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot, sir.
It's my pleasure. I'm happy to share always, and thanks for joining, guys. It's my pleasure to share whatever I know with the team here. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I think we have come to the end of the session. Now, I would like to thank everyone who made this session possible. And I would like to thank Goutham Ramesh, sir, and also our mentor, Ishanya. And also, I would like to thank all the participants who made this session possible. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot, sir.
And thanks, guys.
Okay.
Good light to you guys.